All right. We'll get started with the earthquake in Japan. Aftershocks continuing in Japan after deadly New Year's Day earthquake hit Japan, and then also there was a plane crash that happened. A plane and a rescue plane collided. Let's get started in Japan, and we'll go to Dave Chappelle later.
Plane burst into flames after it collided with a Japanese Coast Guard aircraft on the runway in Tokyo. This new video shows the moment of impact after the passenger jet landed at the airport just hours ago. And you can see in the video the Japan Airlines plane bursting into flames as it goes down the runway there. 5 crew members on the Coast Guard plane were killed. The captain is in critical condition. The crew were preparing to fly to Western Japan to try to help with earthquake relief. Nearly 400 passengers and crew were on the Japan Airlines flight. They were able to escape. 17 people reportedly were hurt. Let's bring in CNN's Will Ripley. He joins us live from Tokyo. So Will, what's the latest here? What are you learning?
Rahel, just within the last couple of hours, the Japanese Prime Minister sending his condolences to the families of those 5 Coast Guard crew members. The Coast Guard has a base right next to the Haneda Airport, which sits in the heart of Tokyo, just 15 or 20 minutes drive from where I'm standing right now. It's one of the best airports to fly into in Japan because of its centralized location right on the bay, and you have a beautiful view of the city when you fly in. But on this very busy day, a day that hours after Japan was rocked by a massive earthquake, you had this Coast Guard crew, 6 people on the plane total, trying to get relief supplies to areas hard hit that desperately need the help. And at the same time, you had a packed Japan Airlines jet that was arriving from Sapporo, which was right in the prime of their tourist season up there on the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido. This plane had 367 people on board, including 8 children under the age of 2. So you had parents with their kids. You had 12 crew members and a fully packed plane. And just before 6 p.m. local time, as this aircraft was landing on the runway, the Coast Guard aircraft was also...
I know that Israel made a drone strike in Beirut, Lebanon, and killed the deputy chief of Hamas. I know. We're going to get to that. It's, of course,
on the same runway. How did that happen? That is the focus and going to be the focus of an extensive investigation here in Tokyo, a nation that prides itself on public transportation safety, a nation that's never had a single fatality and decades of running bullet trains at hundreds of miles an hour. And yet somehow, for whatever reason, that reason to be determined, these 2 aircraft had a very, very violent collision that resulted in a huge fireball. Both of the planes were in flames in a matter of seconds, and passengers who were on the Japan Airlines jet described black smoke filling the cabin. They were terrified. Parents, trying to keep their kids as safe as they could, wondering if they were going to make it out alive. A lot of passengers saying they just didn't think that they would, especially when the exit doors, according to the passengers, in the rear and middle parts of the aircraft were not working properly. But yet, through the front exit doors, and there's video of this that's emerging on social media, people, one by one, streamed out of each side of the front of the aircraft, and in just a matter of seconds, all 400 or so people who were on that aircraft made it off alive. 17 of them in the hospital with injuries. But an extraordinary thing, when you look at the video of that plane that was then very quickly fully engulfed in flames, still smoldering on the runway. It took firefighters well over an hour to get the fire under control. Haneda Airport, a very busy hub, of course, shut down right now and likely to be shut down for quite some time as they investigate exactly how this happened, as they look into the cause of this. But still, the fact that so many people, hundreds of people, were able to walk away, even as Japan mourns the loss of these 5 Coast Guard crew members, it is truly a remarkable moment at the beginning of 2024, which has been very rough for Japan, given the earthquake first and then this collision on the runway right in the heart of the Japanese capital, Rahel.
Yeah, certainly just a really dark period for Japan. But as you say, just remarkable that hundreds of people were able to escape those flames. Will Ripley live for us there in Tokyo. Will, thank you.
Right, with us now, CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine. And Pete, when you look at those pictures, when you see that plane in flames, it's a near miracle that everyone on board was able to get out. What do you see when you look at it?
What I see, and you see the impact there in the first 2 seconds of that video, is really a wake-up call, not only for aviation in Japan, but also around the world, and especially in the United States. We'll get to that in a second. Japan Airlines Flight 516, this was a Airbus A350, only 2 years old, came into land on runway 34 right there at Haneda. What is interesting here is that we know from the track of the plane airplane, that this plane was coming into land and the plane behind it had to go around. We do not know the track specifically because there's no data available from that Japan Coast Guard Dash 8 airplane. 6 people on board, 5 of them are dead. We know that the captain of that flight is in critical condition. What is really striking to me is the communication and the coordination by the crew that made this evacuation so successful. Not just the pilots, but all of the crew, the flight attendants especially. Japan prides itself on efficiency. They got these people out in a very short period of time. There you can see the 2 airplanes, and there's a big size difference here. A Dash 8 is a much smaller airplane, although it clearly did a lot of damage to the front of that Airbus A350.
So you don't see my cable management.
This is the first time an Airbus A350 has ever experienced a hull loss, meaning the airplane is completely destroyed. What is clear right now is that there was a huge safety failure here in a culture that is incredibly safety conscious. The Japanese airlines had a spate of accidents in the 80s and 90s. They really cleaned up their act, but is also clear is that this was something where there was an airplane in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now the question is where the confusion took place. Was it confusion on the part of air traffic control, or was it confusion by one of the crews involved in that Japan Coast Guard flight or in that Japan Airlines flight? So this is something that investigators really need to look at, and of course they will listen to the air traffic control tapes and the communication there to see if anything was garbled.
That's racist culture that's incredibly safe. I mean, it's literally true. What do you mean? No, Japanese, it's not even just Japanese culture in general, but like the way that it's set up, there's like a shit ton of redundancies for stop, it's racist. No, it's not. What are you talking about? Same goes for earthquakes in general. Yeah, it's racist to say like Japanese architecture is pretty incredible at mitigating some of the worst impacts of earthquakes as a consequence of being an island that is prone to being hit by devastating earthquakes and tsunamis. No, it's just true. It's not a racist thing. I'm all pissed trying to say you live in Japanese hood. What? No, it's just, it's a ridiculous thing to say that is racist. It would be racist if you said like Rwanda's safety measures are lackluster as a consequence of their culture, because it's not a cultural phenomena and more so material conditions at play there. With respect to Japan, saying it's like Japanese culture or whatever is still silly because ultimately they just but it's not racist. How is it that some of the most earthquake-prone areas in the world always have these lax building practices? What is this? Never missing out. Oh, yeah, chat for you. No, I'm saying they're pissed you call it safe. They're trying to act like it's harder than it is. No, there are issues with safety. Like, I don't know why we're talking about this, but here, let me explain something. Let me explain something to you. For example, there's this like Twitter phenomena, right? Where like women will post about like how South Korea is so safe and you can walk alone at night and it's not a big deal at all. And similar things could be said about Japan as well, right? Similar things could be said about Japan as well. However, the idea that like there isn't a tremendous amount of sexual violence towards women in both of these countries is so ridiculous, right? People just oftentimes will make these comparisons in a racist way, right? But the idea that like it gives you a broad picture, the idea that it gives you the broadest picture that is perfectly correct and accurate is ridiculous. Yeah, South Korea's president is an incel, like an open incel.
What is really interesting here in the United States is that there has been incident after incident of airplanes in the wrong place at the wrong time on the surface of an airport. They are known officially as a runway incursion, and we have seen 7 of these incidents get so serious that the National Transportation Safety Board has been involved. JFK, Austin, Boston, Burbank, the list goes on. This incident really immediately reminds me of the Austin incident where a FedEx flight was coming into land at Austin Bergstrom last February. Southwest Airlines flight was lined up on the runway ready to take off. It was in bad weather conditions. It was dark. It was before dawn, and the FedEx crew caught the error and went around. In this case, of course, it was dark. It was about 5:47 p.m. local time, although the weather was pretty good. And now the question is whether or not this Japan Airlines flight crew was able to see this plane in front of them and why it was there. So a lot of big questions here, and investigators really have their work cut out for them, John.
And let's discuss this more and get more analysis on this. Miles O'Brien joining us now. He's a CNN aviation and aerospace analyst. Miles, good to see you today. Unfortunately, certainly a dark day for Japan.
I guess they couldn't get Austin on to do this coverage, it seems. You know? That's what you get. We here at the Hasanabi broadcast have better experts, subject matter experts that we can bring on. Unfortunately, currently, none of my aviation experts are available, whether it be Murat or Austin. So I'm just gonna spitball myself. But
and just your initial read. I mean, what do you think happened here?
Well, Rahel, you know, there are many, many layers of safety built into the system. And we got down to the absolute last layer here in this one, which was the possibility of an orderly evacuation. And I think we can't underscore enough how successful that evacuation was. The crew did a great job getting them off. And if any group of people collectively would listen to a flight crew and do what they're told and follow the rules, it is the people of Japan. Anybody who's lived there and knows the culture there, they do in fact listen to rules and follow rules. So that was really fantastic, and there was a great demonstration of the possibilities there. The other thing to think about here, Rahel, is there have been decades of work on the part of the FAA and other organizations to reduce the flammability of the materials that are inside the cabin of an aircraft. And this is an example here, I think, of the success there, that it holds off potential danger from the toxic fumes and the flames enough time to get passengers off if they listen to the rules. So we can take that away as a half-full look at it, but clearly there's some dramatic failure in the system here, which will have to be identified and worked on.
And how do they do that? I mean, once they identify the causes here, walk us through how they officially investigate this.
Well, you've got 3 main parties here. You've got the flight crew aboard the Airbus A350. You have
definitely policy over culture. I think it is policy. That part is not culture. I think it's policy. And that policy stems from, I guess, cultural attitudes in general. But it certainly is policy over culture in this regard, yes.
Apparently, the surviving pilot, the Coast Guard pilot on the Dash 8, the smaller aircraft, and you have the air traffic controllers up there in the control tower. And each of them will have a story to tell. They'll be interviewed separately. And of course, on top of that, what you have are lots of recordings of the air traffic control communications. And
is it because of an earthquake or because of bad navigation? No, this happened. The reason why this happened is because the Coast Guard plane was operating due to the earthquake. And I assume some wires got crossed in that situation. And well, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, they probably already know what the deal is.
The cockpit voice recorder on the Airbus A350. I'm not sure if that Japanese Coast Guard craft was similarly equipped. We'll have to see about that. But the parties involved, the people who made the decisions in this case, are all present and with us still to sort of sort out what happened, where the confusion happened. As Pete pointed out, it was good weather, but it was nighttime. It's the busiest airport in the Pacific Rim, in the middle of a terrible disaster. A lot of adrenaline going, I'm sure, with that Coast Guard crew trying to get needed relief supplies up to the stricken region. So there are a lot of subtle human factors here that need to be addressed.
Miles O'Brien, we appreciate the time and the insights today. Thank you, Miles.
You're welcome, Rahel.
Turning back to Japan now, a series of earthquakes rocked the western part of the country. At least 48 people have been killed and 17 seriously injured, according to officials. Aftershocks continue to shake Ishikawa Prefecture and nearby areas just a day after a magnitude 7.6 tremor shook the area on New Year's Day. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more.
A Weather Service camera caught the start of the quake. It destroyed homes, cracked highways, shook railway stations, and even set a temple gong ringing. At one shrine where people had gathered for New Year's, it almost toppled the ancient stones. American Daniel Smith was there.
It just started very slowly, and everybody kind of laughed it off. They thought, this is kind of humorous, on New Year's Day. And then it was just a violent shaking. Violent shaking.
A tsunami warning was broadcast Monday afternoon for the area around the epicenter on Japan's northwest coast. In the main town of Nanao, locals gathered on a hill, anxiously watching the sea and waiting in the cold for either disaster or the all clear. Japan is still traumatized by memories of the huge earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
I've seen that video so many times. The one with like the black water just coming in and ripping all the K trucks away. That one is crazy. The old one that they just showed, the old video. Oh. Oh. What a way to start the year, man.
Killed more than 18,000 people and caused one of the world's worst nuclear meltdowns at Fukushima. This morning, with the threat of a tsunami over, Japan's nuclear authorities said its reactors were all fine. But large areas of the Noto Peninsula have been devastated. Mudslides and crumpled roads are now complicating efforts to find people who may still be trapped under the ruins. And this evening, we're hearing that at the main airport, 500 people are trapped in the building. Some of them are travelers who simply can't go anywhere because the runways have been too damaged for planes to come in and out. And others are just taking shelter there because they've been forced out of their homes. Lindsay?
Elizabeth, what is the latest on search and rescue efforts?
This means that John Mayer is currently stuck in Japan. And I'm not even kidding. There was, if I wasn't going to Italy, there was a shot that I was going to go with a couple friends alongside himself to Japan over New Year's. Not a bad place to be stuck in, to be honest. Not while a, active incident is happening, like a natural disaster. I would have liked it because I would have streamed it. I would have gone to I would have tried to I've never actually done, like a natural disaster stream. Bro, sit down. You're making me anxious. What do you mean? Why? Why do you guys say Jesus to that? I don't think that's that crazy of a thing to say, because why would that be a crazy thing to say? It's that's my job, is to cover the news. I like that you say content brained, it's not what I do. You know what I mean? You also, I've talked about doing a storm chasing thing.
The Army has a base in that region. It's a peninsula on the northwest coast of Japan, and those soldiers have been deployed along with health search and rescue experts to try and get under some of the buildings that have collapsed. And of course, there is food and blankets and medicine on the way. But as you saw in those pictures, so many of the roads have been damaged that the Japanese authorities are being forced to think about helicopter or even ship deliveries to get the right amount of aid in time.
We know Japan is no stranger to earthquakes. They have been working on fortifying. So was this region prepared for something of this magnitude?
Japan's building code is among the strictest in the world, and most buildings are, if not earthquake-proof, at least earthquake-resistant, certainly in the big cities. But this is quite a remote area, which means there will be many more wooden houses. They're old, and they are not necessarily updated for the more modern building codes, which is probably why more of them seem to have fallen down than, say, earthquakes in bigger, more modern cities. Also, there are a lot of old people there who may not have been able to keep their properties up. And at least one man said that he thought his house had been damaged in an earthquake last year, and he was on the list to get repairs done when this earthquake hit. So the structure had already been weakened, and it just fell down.
And Liz, as the country is recovering from these quakes, a Japan Airlines plane has burst into flames on a Tokyo runway. We understand it also is involving a plane to deliver aid for this other catastrophe. What more do we know?
Well, it's tragic and it's ironic. About 6 o'clock here, there were suddenly reports of a Japan Airlines jet on fire, very dramatically. You could see it had come into land and it was in flames. The chutes, the emergency chutes were deployed. Everybody got off safely. But it turned out that a little Coast Guard plane, which was apparently on the runway just as the big Airbus was landing, and there was a collision. And of the 6 crew on board, 5 have been killed, and they were on a mission to deliver relief to the earthquake zone.
Tragedy upon tragedy. Elizabeth, thank you.
So if you're just joining us here, we're going to...
All right, we're going to talk about, is it comfy to do socks or shoes on that? Doesn't matter. You can do it with socks. I do it with socks instead of shoes because I'm too tall.